Imagine this for a moment. You always end up in the same emotional place. You look at the person in front of you, or even just their picture on your phone, and deep down you feel the same thing as always. I'm not enough. He or she is above me. I'm the one who has to try harder. It doesn't matter what you achieve. It doesn't matter what people tell you. Inside you there is a silent voice that puts you one step below. Today, we're going to look that voice straight in the eye. We're going to understand from Carl Jung's psychology why your unconscious makes you feel less, where that really comes from, and above all, how to begin to step out of that pattern, so that your relationships and decisions no longer grow out of inferiority, but out of your real worth. If throughout your life you've repeated stories where you fall in love with someone who doesn't choose you, you compare yourself with that person's exes, you feel you give more than you receive, or you stay in bonds where you always seem to be the lucky one who has to be grateful just to be noticed, this video is for you. And here's where it gets interesting. It's not just about low self-esteem, nor simply that you lack self-love, as people repeat everywhere. From the Jungian point of view, what lies behind it is a deep web of shadow, of masks you wear without realizing it, of archetypes and old complexes that pull the strings of your decisions in love. The most important thing is that those strings can be seen. They can be understood, and, with time and honesty, they can be transformed. Picture an everyday scene. You're looking at the chat with that person. You see they're online but not answering you. You feel a knot in your stomach. You think, they're probably talking to someone else. I'm not that interesting. I should be funnier, more attractive, more something. Nothing serious has happened on the outside, but inside, a storm breaks loose. That storm wasn't born in that chat. It wasn't born in that silence. It comes from much earlier. From analytical psychology, we'd say that in that moment a complex got activated, a kind of charged emotional nucleus that lives in your personal unconscious, made of memories, emotions and beliefs from your history. And that complex has a favorite message: you're not enough. Up to this point it might seem normal, something that simply has to do with past experiences. But here comes what almost no one sees. That feeling of being less doesn't only stay in your inner dialogue, it also organizes who you desire, what you allow, what you call destiny, and even how you interpret coincidences. It's as if a part of you, deeply unconscious, was seeking scenarios where the story of I am less repeats itself over and over again. And many times, those stories are lived in love. To understand this, we're going to move step by step through some key concepts from Jung's psychology, but in simple words, applied to real life. You don't need to know theory. You just need to be willing to look at yourself honestly. Think about the persona, that mask we all wear when we go out into the world. It's the version of you that you show in order to fit in, to be accepted, to feel you belong. Maybe your persona is the one who always looks confident, pleasing, strong, the one who says they don't need anyone, or the one who is always available and smiling to avoid conflict. That mask isn't bad in itself. We need it to live in society. The problem appears when you identify so much with that persona that you forget you are not just that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mirror, your shadow is there. The shadow is everything you are but don't accept, don't see or reject in yourself. Very often, in people who feel less, the shadow contains exactly the opposite of what they show: power, legitimate anger, dignity, your own desires, the ability to set boundaries, ambition, sensuality, even a healthy kind of pride. Because it sounds wrong or it feels scary to show these things, you send them down to the basement of the mind. And then you keep living from a persona that presents as small, available, kind, adaptable, while your shadow holds the giant you could be. What almost no one asks is, what happens when that shadow, full of strength, is not recognized? What usually happens is that you project it. Projection is one of the central points for understanding why you feel less in front of certain people. To project means you see outside what you don't recognize in yourself. For example, you look at that person you like and they seem brilliant, special, powerful, magnetic. You think, they're too much for me, they're out of my league. And you don't realize that part of that light you are seeing out there is also yours, your potential, your strength, your worth. You just haven't accepted it as your own. You see it in the other and you make yourself small in front of your own projection. Here comes the uncomfortable part. Very often, you feel attracted precisely to the people onto whom you project your shadow, because they awaken in you the feeling of being close to something very valuable, almost sacred. And at the same time, you place yourself in the position of disciple, of inferior, of the one who has to prove themselves worthy, of the one who doesn't measure up. Does that mix of fascination and smallness feel familiar to you? From this perspective, it is not so much that this person is a god and you are a mere mortal. It is that you are worshipping a part of yourself you don't dare to embody. Now, the unconscious doesn't only hold your personal story. According to Jung, there is also a collective unconscious, a deeper level where universal patterns live, the famous archetypes. They are like big molds of human experience: the lover, the hero, the victim, the rescuer, the persecutor, the wounded child, the mother, the father, and many more. These archetypes are not abstract ideas. They show up in how you live your relationships. For example, if the victim archetype is very active in you, it is likely that you place yourself in scenes where you always end up losing, where you feel others have the power and you just receive whatever they decide to give. If, on the other hand, the rescuer archetype is very activated, you may choose partners you see as broken, wounded, in need of your love, and that keeps you in the fantasy that if you give enough, they will finally choose you. In both cases, underneath there is often the same message. You only have value if you fulfill a rule, if you fit a script, not for who you are in essence. Up to here, it might seem that everything comes down to the past, childhood wounds and cultural patterns. But here comes the point where most people get it wrong. They think that if they understand their story rationally, the work is done. From the analytical psychology perspective, it is not enough to know I feel less because my parents were like this or because at school they made me feel small. That's an important beginning, but the heart of the work lies in how your unconscious is alive now, in how you keep acting, choosing and reacting today. Imagine another scene. You're with your partner or with someone you're interested in. You're at a gathering and this person starts talking to someone else. They laugh. They seem to connect. Nothing serious happens, but you start comparing yourself. Inside you say, of course, that person is more interesting, funnier, more attractive, more successful. And before you realize it, you're already in an inner monologue where you humiliate yourself. It is as if there were a voice inside you dictating, you're the plan B, you're less. That voice is not you. It's an activated complex. Yes, an inferiority complex, but in the way Jung understood it, a cluster of emotions, beliefs, and images that take you over completely when they get triggered. In that state, you don't see reality as it is, you see it filtered through that complex. What almost no one sees is that when a complex is activated, you're no longer in charge. That's why afterward you say, I don't know why I reacted like that. I don't know why I begged. I don't know why I accepted that. In Jungian language, we might say the complex possessed you. And if throughout your life you have, without meaning to, been feeding a complex that says I'm not worth it, I'm less, I have to try hard so they don't leave me. That complex wakes up precisely in the situations where you could feel most vulnerable in love, in desire, in emotional intimacy. And then you become someone who lowers themselves, who adapts, who tolerates, who waits, even when your conscious side knows this isn't good for you. Here comes the most uncomfortable part. One part of you may be using the idea of destiny to justify these patterns. Phrases like, if they don't reach out, it's because I'm not enough. If they come back, it's because we're meant to be. If they reappear every time, it's a sign from the universe. Can become entertaining ways of not seeing something simpler and more painful. That a part of you is so used to feeling less that it feels strangely familiar to put yourself in places where you are not fully chosen. From the Jungian perspective, we also talk about synchronicity. Synchronicity is those meaningful coincidences that feel full of significance, as if something bigger were guiding your encounters. For example, you think of someone and they show up. You decide to forget them and bump into them in the street. You set a boundary and just then they text, "I miss you." Is that just chance? Pure magic? The honest answer is, we can't know for sure. But what we can say is that, beyond whether there is an invisible order, the crucial thing is what you do with those signs. Many people use synchronicity as an excuse to go back into dynamics that hurt them. Just when I was going to let go, they appeared. It must be fate. From this perspective, the healthier question is another. Is this sign aligned with my growth, my dignity, my well-being, or does it simply reactivate my complex of feeling less? Here comes what almost no one tells you. Many signs that seem to speak of destiny are actually speaking about your unconscious. It's not so much that the universe sends you impossible tests, but that your mind latches onto whatever confirms the inner script you already carry. If your script is I am less, everything that happens round you will be read from there. A silence becomes rejection. A disagreement becomes abandonment. A pause becomes I'm not worth it. Now let us talk about something very deep and important. The inner image you have of love, of the masculine and the feminine within you. What Jung called anima and animus. Let's simplify. Inside each person there is an inner image of the other, a kind of ideal figure that represents what you expect from love, from holding, from strength, from care, from passion. If that inner image is wounded, if it's based on experiences where love always came with humiliation, comparison, or a sense of inferiority, it's very likely that, without realizing it, you look for something similar on the outside, as if a part of you said, this kind of bond feels familiar. This must be love. For example, if in your early story love came from figures who made you feel small, who criticized you, who compared you, who had little time for you, you can end up unconsciously associating love with the sensation of being less. And when someone shows up who genuinely puts you on a pedestal, who sees you as an equal, who respects you, they might seem boring or without spark. While the one who gives you crumbs, who makes you doubt, who treats you as if you are easily replaceable, can ignite an obsession in you. It's not that you're masochistic, it's that your unconscious recognizes they're the script it knows. And that script is woven through a complex. For me to be loved, I have to accept feeling less. The key question is, how do you get out of such a script? How do you stop believing that inner voice that shrinks you? This is where a central process in Jung's psychology comes in: individuation. Individuation is the path of becoming who you really are, beyond masks, wounds, and inherited scripts. It's not about becoming better than others, but about becoming more complete, integrating your shadow, no longer identifying only with the persona that always pleases and reconciling with your own inner strengths. Translated to your case, stop acting as if you were less and begin to live from the recognition of your own worth, even when one part of you is still afraid. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It's not about repeating empty phrases in front of a mirror. The first step is much more humble and powerful: observing. Observe honestly when you feel less. Not in theory, in practice. For example, notice what happens in your body and your mind when that person takes a long time to answer you. Pay attention to this. What in a story appears? Do you tell yourself you're not interesting? That you don't deserve to be a priority? That this always happens to you? Recognizing that voice is already starting to separate from it, because as long as you confuse it with yourself, it rules you instead. When you say inwardly, "Oh, here is that I am less" voice again, you are no longer just the character in the script. You're also the observer. What almost no one sees is that this act of observation is already an act of individuation. You are bringing something that lived in the shadow into the light. And every time you bring a fragment of shadow into consciousness, it stops running you from behind. You still feel it, but it doesn't dominate you in the same way. However, here comes the uncomfortable part. Seeing your shadow means recognizing not only your pain, but also the part of you that cooperates with the script. For example, you may discover that there is a strange satisfaction in continuing to occupy the place of the poor thing, the rejected one, because it allows you to avoid the responsibility of setting boundaries or leaving places where you were not treated well. Recognizing this is not blaming yourself. It is looking at yourself with deep sincerity. Now, I want to offer you a small practical package you can apply in less than 24 hours. To start relating differently to that feeling of being less. At some point today, when you notice yourself comparing or feeling inferior to someone, pause for a moment. Don't change anything on the outside yet. Don't send the message. Don't make the impulsive decision. Just stop and ask yourself, what part of me feels less right now? Don't answer with general ideas. Try to feel it. Maybe the image of your insecure teenage self appears, or a child who didn't feel enough for their mother or father. Maybe you don't see anything clearly, but you feel a tightness in your chest. Just observe, and then add a very simple inner phrase: this is not the whole truth about me. This is a complex speaking. This is an old story. It doesn't create instant magic, but it weakens the absolute power of that voice. Later, when you're in a calm moment, take a sheet of paper and write 2 columns, without obsessing over the form. In one, write the phrases you usually say to yourself when you feel less, just as they appear, without censorship. I'm not that attractive. They definitely have better options. If they leave me, it's because someone else is better. I don't have anything special. In front of each phrase, write a reframing from the Jungian perspective. For example, if you wrote, "If they don't stay with me, it is because it wasn't meant to be," you might transform it into something like, "If they don't stay with me, it's because this relationship is not aligned with my individuation process with the kind of love that honors my value. My destiny is not to be less. It is to learn to live from my wholeness." If you wrote, "I'm not enough," you can reframe it as, "There's an inferiority complex that makes me feel I am not enough." That doesn't mean it's the truth. My worth doesn't depend on this person. The important thing is not that the phrases are perfect, but that you feel they are closer to a broader truth, not to the narrow, cruel version of your complex. If you do this exercise honestly, it can begin to open small cracks in the wall of "I am less." Here comes another key point. the way you choose your bonds. Jung said relationships are one of the privileged places where the unconscious shows itself. Every time you relate to someone, your archetypes, your shadow, your complexes and your inner images of love come into play. Ask yourself calmly, what kinds of stories are repeated in my love life? Do I usually choose people who make me feel I have to earn my place? Do I get hooked on those who are ambiguous, distant, unclear? Do I distrust or get bored with those who treat me with genuine respect and affection? These questions are not to judge yourself. They're so you can start seeing the pattern. The most uncomfortable part comes now. If you always feel less, it's not only because others make you feel that way. A part of you, without wanting to, is collaborating. Maybe you take every neutral gesture as proof of your low worth. Maybe you tolerate comments or behaviors that go against your dignity. Maybe you idealize the other person and magnify their virtues while minimizing your own. That's the dance between your persona and your shadow. You present yourself as small, while in the shadow frustration, anger and also a deep longing to truly be seen pile up. If you don't work on that inside, the shadow will end up exploding in ways you don't expect. Jealous outbursts, desperate scenes, or on the contrary, emotional disappearances where you disconnect all at once. This is where the individuation path becomes deeply practical. It's not something abstract, it's very concrete. It means making room for your shadow, acknowledging your own desire, your own healthy pride, your ability to say no. It also means remembering that you are not your complex. You can feel less in a moment and still behave from your value. That means, for example, that even if it hurts, you can decide not to chase someone who doesn't choose you. You can set a limit with someone who compares you to others. You can step away from a humiliating conversation. It will hurt, yes, because you're challenging a very old script. But every time you choose from your value, you're rewriting your relationship with your unconscious. Now, you might be asking yourself, and what does all this have to do with the collective unconscious, with archetypes, with soulmates and destiny? A lot. The idea of a soulmate can be beautiful, but also dangerous when it mixes with an inferiority complex. If you feel less, any person who makes you vibrate strongly can be placed in that soulmate position, and from there, you tolerate the intolerable because you think, I can't lose them. They're my other half. From the Jungian point of view, we could see the figure of the soulmate as a symbol of something deeper. You're longing for a wholeness, for union with your own self, your inner center. When you don't know this, you project it onto someone in the flesh. You give them the power to decide whether you're worthy or not. The key question is it really destiny, or is it your shadow choosing? Is it a meaningful synchronicity guiding you toward a more conscious love, or is it a repeated pattern that keeps you trapped in the story of being less? There's no magic formula to tell the difference, but there are some hints. If the sign you see leads you into a bond where you can be yourself, where you can grow, where your dignity is respected, where you don't have to shrink for things to work, then it's probably aligned with your individuation process. If, on the contrary, that sign pulls you back into a relationship where you constantly feel inferior, anxious, humiliated, it's more likely to be the movement of your complex, not of destiny. Here's something that can bring relief. Your unconscious is not your enemy. It's not plotting to destroy you, even though it sometimes looks that way. What it does is repeat over and over what it knows, what was recorded as normal. If what you knew was love mixed with the feeling of being less, that's what it'll be reluctant to let go of. But the same unconscious that repeats stories can also become your ally when you start to dialogue with it, to listen to it in dreams, symptoms, intuitions, images that come to mind. A simple way to begin this dialogue is to observe what images repeat when you feel small. Do you see yourself tiny in front of someone huge? Do you see yourself begging for attention? Do you picture yourself dim and the other radiant? Those images are doors into your inner world. Now, I want you to imagine something different. Imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror, but not an ordinary one. A symbolic mirror that reflects not only your appearance, but also the parts of you that you've denied. In that mirror appear your tenderness, your intelligence, your ability to love, your sense of humor, your strength, even your mistakes and contradictions. You're not perfect, but you're also not that insignificant being your complex describes. See yourself like that, whole. This image may feel strange, even fake at first, but it's more real than the idea that you only have value if someone chooses you. What almost no one allows themselves is to make the inner decision to stop placing themselves at the bottom. It's a silent decision that doesn't need big speeches. From today on, even if it still hurts, I am not going to maintain bonds that require me to make myself smaller so they work. That doesn't mean becoming arrogant or believing you're better than anyone. It means stopping accepting a position of inferiority as the price of company. And every time life puts in front of you the temptation of that old place, because it will, you'll be able to ask yourself, am I choosing from my wound or from my individuation process? It's likely that, as you listen to this, a part of you says, it sounds good, but I don't know if I'll be able to do it. That part also deserves to be heard. It is the inner boy or girl who learned that the world was a place where they had to adapt, be quiet, meet expectations, and now is afraid that if they stand in their value, they'll be punished or abandoned. Don't respond to them harshly. You can answer with something like, I understand you're afraid. You've been protecting me like this for a long time. But now I'm not alone. Now I'm an adult. Now I can choose differently. We're not going to stop deserving love by refusing to feel less. On the contrary, as you move forward on this path, you're going to run into very human moments, relapses, returns to old patterns, messages you shouldn't have sent, silences you didn't know how to hold. Don't take it as failure. From the Jungian viewpoint, each fall can become extremely valuable material if you look at it with curiosity instead of condemnation. Ask yourself, what part of me chose this? What was it looking for? Which archetype was in charge? Which complex was activated? That attitude turns your mistakes into content for your individuation process, not into proof that you are less.